Hi, good morning. It's me, Danielle from ABC Life Support. We just had the most awful technical difficulties, and I actually had a dream about it last night. I'm not even joking. Like, it all went wrong, and I woke up this morning and said to my husband, oh my gosh, I had this awful dream that all the technology went wrong, and no word of a lie, it just did. So I apologise for being a couple of minutes late. I've got you up and running now, so I hope you can all see and hear me properly. As promised today, we're going to be talking about CPR. Before we kick off, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for sharing the advert for this post. I was inundated with 30 shares. It was amazing. So thank you so much for sharing this information. I think it's really important while we're all in this strange situation to keep our skills up to date, to keep our knowledge there, to learn how to be of service effectively if something was to happen to somebody in our home. And before this took place, or before the big coronavirus came into our lives, we needed to learn this stuff, and we still do need to learn this stuff. This week I was speaking to a number of schools who are still requiring first aid skills for the people that they're looking after, the children they're looking after, the key workers that are going out there and doing work on our behalf. So instead of doing face-to-face courses, we're now teaching people online so that they can get the skills up to date. You know, they can keep the learning there, because after all, the certificate, the piece of paper, doesn't give people the knowledge. It's the practice and the understanding that gives people knowledge. So thank you very much for sharing these posts, and I will be continuing to do these ones each week on a Thursday at 11. Next week we're going to be looking at burns, and the week after we're going to be looking at allergic reactions. Both of my children are going to be involved in those, because Hermione, when she was very young, was burnt, and my son has a peanut allergy. So I'm going to be talking to them about how they feel about it, and talking about how it was that I was able to treat them with the knowledge I've got in my head. So there are a couple of the ideas that we're going to be coming together with you over the next couple of weeks. But back to today. So today we're going to be talking about CPR. Last week we looked at the recovery position, which was for somebody who was unconscious but breathing. This week we're going to be looking at somebody who is unconscious and not breathing. I'm not going to go into too much technical detail, but I am available for any questions. If you leave it in the stream after today, or put it in the comments box, I'll come back to you later on once we've finished this live feed. But for now, we're going to be going back to some CPR. So I want to kind of jog your memory. This is a picture of Sebastian. This is my oldest. He's now 12. This picture was taken at our local park. I paid him well, about £1.50 at Dave's sweet shop, and he was supposed to be demonstrating a young person at the bottom of a climbing frame who had fallen and was now consequently unconscious. It was quite interesting, because quite a lot of people were saying to me afterwards, you know, some people that were actually there with their children in the park, you know, what are you doing, you know, why is that ball on the floor, etc. And I obviously had to explain to them that I was taking some photos for work. What I found quite interesting is that none of the people that were in the park with their loved ones, their children or their grandchildren, would have known what to have done. None of them. I said, you know, if this was to happen, what would you do? And they were like, oh gosh, I don't know, I wouldn't move them, I would call an ambulance. And I think I was slowly whispered into Sebastian's ears that you're never coming to the park without your mum. Because actually the knowledge of the people in our communities in terms of first aid can be, and I say can be, quite shocking. So today we're going to be looking at what to do in the result of that sort of incident, but when we check for breathing, they're not breathing. So just to go through our age ranges again, to keep your knowledge there. This baby represents a baby from birth up to 1. All right, so that's a baby from birth up to 1. And this child here represents a child from 1 to puberty. So around 10, I always say in terms of puberty, if they look like a child, treat them like a child. And then here we have our adult mannequin, which represents somebody from puberty right up to old age. All right, so these are the age ranges that I take on all my courses. Even my paediatric courses, I will take an adult, and on my adult courses I will always take the children and the babies, because I think it's really important that if you are in a situation where you could be of service for anybody, regardless of their age, it would be useless if you've gone on a course and only done age-specific CPR practice. So that's why I always take all my mannequins, and I always tell my trainers as well, take all your age mannequins. And when we're looking at basic life support, which is what we're doing today, then you can cover all ages to make sure that people have the skills that they need. So CPR, first of all, back to basics, stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and it always works. And I know it sounds a bit random when I say that, but CPR has quite a high expectation for people. People believe that you deliver CPR because you want to try and get somebody to come back alive, and it's not true. And it also causes some heartache, actually. I mean, I've delivered some courses in the past before where people have had to perform CPR on loved ones and they've said it didn't work. And that's an awful lot of pressure to put on somebody, because actually the CPR worked at the time, but that person didn't have a positive outcome, all right? It's out of our hands as to whether or not somebody has a positive outcome, i.e. whether or not they live or die. That's outside of these hands. But what is in these hands is the ability to keep somebody's brain viable by providing oxygen to their brain whilst performing CPR. So that's all we do. We do CPR to keep the brain oxygenated, so that if this is a positive outcome, they have brain function. I think it's really important that people understand that, because I remember going on a course once and a woman said that she performed CPR on her dad, who died unfortunately, but she carried around this feeling of guilt for so long because she thought that her CPR didn't work. It was heartbreaking. And I always said, you know, from that time I would always make sure that people are aware that it is not about CPR bringing back somebody from the dead. That's not what it's about. It's about keeping their brain viable, so that if they do survive this event, then they have corpus mentis, they have brain function. All right? So let's get back to basics. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation is performed very, very, very basically. It's a very, very easy process to deliver. It's interesting because some of our Resuscitation Council guidelines now have stated that if you have to perform CPR on somebody that you know could be living with corona or the COVID-19, you could cover their face. So now we're kind of looking at an emphasis on delivering chest-only CPR. So chest-only CPR means that we do not give mouth-to-mouth. That is in its current state, and was prior to this situation, where if you were unable or unwilling, so some people used to say, for example, if somebody's got lots of vomit or blood around their mouth, they were not willing to give CPR, and that's fine, you know, that's their choice. So we would always say, just don't give the mouth to mouth, but always just do the chest compressions. It's also important to understand that if it's a baby or a child, that the circumstances dictate that they probably suffered from something called respiratory failure as opposed to cardiac failure. Okay, so that's also really important. We need to give them breath because they've run out of breath. So that's why, in terms of the differences between CPR for adults and children and babies, we give children and babies 5 breaths first, okay, followed by 30 chest compressions, because it was likely that they'd run out of breath, which led them to this situation beforehand. Whereas if it's an older person, unless they've drowned, and we'll go back to that in terms of respiratory failure, it's likely to be something under the hood. It's something going wrong with the heart. So therefore we need to provide chest compressions first. Now, saying all of that, I'm now going to kind of go back on myself and say, do you know what? If you forgot all of those 5 breaths before, just get into a really quick pattern of 30 to 2 as quickly as you can. All right? Because that way you've got what you need to do, and you're into that routine, which is ideally what we need to get out of this situation. All right? So I'm going to talk you through it. If you remember last week and you were watching, we always go from basics, which is DRAB. So danger response, airway breathing, and then act on what you find. So last week we found they were breathing, and therefore we put them in the recovery position. This week we're going to find that they're not breathing, and therefore we need to perform CPR. So you check around for any danger, check for a response. At this point, help, 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 help. Remember to open that airway, we tilt the head slightly back. Keep the chin maintained. You can put this hand down and just check, listening, looking, feeling for breath. Up to 10 seconds. They're not breathing normally, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So in order to give mouth to mouth to a baby, you put your mouth over the mouth and the nose. All right, it's quite important you put the mouth over the mouth and the nose, and you give 5 short, sharp puffs. All right, so whatever you have in your mouth at one time is plenty. You don't have to take a breath. And out of the corner of my eye, I'm going to watch this chest rising. Okay, once I've seen it rise, that's enough breath. I don't need to push any more. So that's 5 short, sharp breaths. Then I need to take 2 fingers into the middle of the chest, and I always measure it underneath the armpits. So 2 fingers in the middle, and then I push down 30 times at a rate of 100 to 120 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. straight back to 2 breaths. Remember to keep that chin lifted. And then 30 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, then again 30. 2 breaths and 30. And you just continue to do this. At this point, people normally ask, when do you call for an ambulance? Well, I shouted for help, and hopefully that person who is in the house would call for an ambulance. If I'm ever by myself, then I would do this for about a minute. The one thing about having mobile phones with us all the time these days is that I don't have to be far from my phone. So you get your phone out, call 999 and carry on with the chest compressions mouth to mouth and tell them what's happened, and they'll send out an ambulance for you. But don't stop this. This is the most important part, because we're feeding that brain with oxygen. And if the brain is starved of oxygen for more than 2 to 3 minutes, then it can suffer from irreversible brain injury. So it's really important that we do not interrupt this process, even when we're making that phone call, all right? And also be aware that the ambulance service will talk you through this. You're not on your own, okay? So I'll come back and do a run through again shortly, but I'll just go up in terms of the age range. So this one, like I said before, this is our child. So this is from age 1 to puberty. So again, same thing applies. I'm checking around for any danger. I'm checking for a response. Help, 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 help. This time I can tilt that head back a little bit more, all right? And I can check that breathing. Okay, they're not breathing. This time, in order to get the breath in, you need to pinch the nose. Pinch the nose tight so that the nostrils are closed, and then I need to open my mouth wide to seal that mouth entirely with my own. Because if I breathe and the mouth is not sealed, the air will just come out of the mouth and not into the lungs where it needs to be. Take those 2 fingers and maintain that really loose tilt of the chin and breathe hard. Right, you can see that I'm taking my mouth away from the mouth at each breath, just so I can get myself some fresh breath. This time, instead of 2 fingers, I'm going to use 1 hand, but the measurement is exactly the same. Under the armpits. If that mannequin had arms, you go under the armpit and find the space in between at the breastbone. Straighten my hand up, and this time come up, all right? And I'm going to be using more body weight this time, which is why I'm kind of just leaning up a little bit more. Get my hair out the way, all right? And the same thing goes, so 30 chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. I always do it in stages of 10, so 3 sets of 10, because it's easier for me to count. And I'm going to assume that I've done 30 again. I've done 30, that's enough. 2 breaths. And people often say to me, at this point, what if I go over? What if you do 26? What if you do 35? It does not matter, all right? Just get into that routine as quickly as you can, and then give the breath. I think it's really important that people don't get het up on the specifics. It's important, but it is more important to just get the ball rolling on this. And then do another 2. If doing 1 hand becomes quite tiring, then you can always use 2, but don't put so much effort, as you will be required to do that shortly on the adult. Okay, so that's how we perform CPR on the child. Next one here. Okay, so in terms of adults are going to require an awful lot more effort from you, a lot more energy from you, and it's quite important that you use your entire body weight, including a bit of junk in the trunk, all right? So get your thighs and your bum involved in this part, because if I was to just require my arms or use my arms for this, I would get fatigued extremely quickly, and it is extremely tiring having to do CPR. I have had to do CPR on a real person before, and I can testify that it is one of the hardest things physically and mentally that I have ever had to do in my life. So just be aware of how much effort is required for this, okay? So again, checking around for any dangers, checking for response, tilt that head right back, check for breathing. And on this particular case, what I want you to look for is regular breathing. It's really important that we look for normal breathing, because when a person is in this particular state, it can be that they might be moving around a bit, so their arms might be moving, or they might be ticking or twitching. and they might be having a funny breath sound, like all right, that's not normal breathing. But sometimes people will say, well, I can hear something, so I'm going to put them in the recovery position. And that's unfortunate, because that is not normal breathing. That's actually their breath sounds at the end of life. So it's really important that you recognise a normal pattern of up, down breathing from the stomach, especially when they're unconscious, okay? Anything else, go straight into the chest compressions, okay? So check for danger response. We've opened the airway, check for breathing. Instead of giving the breath this time, I'm going to go straight in. So hands right out, under the armpits, in the middle of the chest. And I'm going to bring myself right the way up, open my legs a bit, okay, and get going. Two breaths, this time a big breath. And again, move straight. And breathe. That rate is 100 to 120 beats a minute. I've heard people saying staying alive works, Nelly the elephant works. They all work as long as you've got a sense of rhythm. And I've seen some people with no rhythm, right? So if you haven't got any, just a straight count of 30, all right? So if you started again, straight count of 30 with no gap. So I always tell my students, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? If there was somebody else here that was able to take over, then I would expect them to be able to help me do this every 2 minutes. We swap on and off, because it gives me a chance to catch my breath, and it gives them a chance to take over, and vice versa. And I have heard, well, personally, of a lady I delivered a course to at a school. Her son had a sudden cardiac death event when he was 29, and his friend was able to keep him alive, or keep him viable, should I say, for quite a long time. And he was on his own, and it was amazing, because the paramedics were there, and he survived that event purely because the chest compressions and the mouth-to-mouth took place for a long time, and they kept him viable. So these things, they can make a massive difference. And I think for me, the lack of knowledge is both scary and unnecessary, because we have resources, we have an understanding of what it is that we can do. But I think what's quite difficult sometimes is people's expectation of this. I went to watch Jumanji. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there is a scene in there where CPR is required, and I got really annoyed. No, because it's a banging film, but it was quite frustrating, because the CPR, and I know it's not about that, so I'm not that bad, but I do find it quite difficult, because we can sometimes take our learning from TV and films. So when I see it not done effectively, or when I've seen it done where there are expectations, for example, you can stop now, they're gone. And I'm like, no, because if you're the watcher watching this, you expect, that's what you expect in real life, so if they haven't come back to life after a couple of minutes, people give up, they stop, because it's not working. And lives are lost as a result of that. So CPR, like I said before, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, it is designed to keep the brain oxygenated and viable, so that if this event is a positive one, a person has brain function. Babies and children, normally respiratory focused, which means that they've run out of oxygen, which is why we give them 5 breaths first. With adults, it's normally cardiac related, which is why we go straight in for chest compressions, followed by 2 breaths. In today's climate, we are saying to people, if you find somebody outside, when you're out on a walk or something like that, and somebody has collapsed and not breathing, you do not have to give mouth to mouth at the moment. You can cover their face with something, so that any oxygen that comes out from them on the exhalation, you're not exposed to. All right, so please don't be afraid to give it a go if you ever need to, because people say, I don't want to hurt them. And I always say to people, if you ever have to perform this, then you can't make it any worse than it currently is. All right, if you ever have to give CPR, you can't get it wrong, because they're at the end of their life. I live next door to a building which has a defibrillator attached to the wall, and where I live here in St. there are I think about 7 public defibrillators, and my wish is that as a community we understand how to use them and where to go get them, but more than that, we know how to do this bit, because if we don't do this bit and we get the defibrillator, which is designed to get the heart into a normal rhythm, then it's pointless because they haven't had any brain function. All right, so it's really important that people understand the whole process and learn this life-saving skill, because it can and does save life. So that's it, CPR today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to teach you this from the comfort of my own home. And I will be putting these on. If there's anything you want me to cover over the next couple of weeks, please just drop us a line on the Facebook page. Share this video with friends and loved ones. Like I said, if anyone else wants to learn anything else, I'll be coming up with, we've got burns and we've got anaphylaxis or severe allergic reactions in the next couple of weeks. But otherwise, any questions, please leave in the comments and I'll do my best to come back to you. But otherwise, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to go and allow my children and my husband to speak now. Have a good day. Take it easy. Bye.